Braves and baseball fans, it's time to take a trip from coast to coast across Major League Baseball.
There it goes, a long drive. If it stays fair, home run.
One strike away. Sandy into his windup. Here's the pitch. Swung on and missed a perfect game.
Fly ball deep left center. Grissom on the run. Yes! The Atlanta Braves have given you a championship. Listen to this crowd.
Left side, Swanson to first. Braves are world champions.
Braves and baseball talk, straight from the diamond.
Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer on your home today. And Window Nation. Call the pros at Window Nation at 866-90Nation.
Here's Grant McAuley.
Hello and welcome to From the Diamond here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. Live from the Kia Studios on a Sunday morning. A hangover type Sunday morning. Maybe what it feels like for the Braves to, I don't know, maybe feeling kind of a perpetual hangover from the start of their season, from that trip out west, from not being home for nearly 2 months, whatever it is, whatever you want to point at. And I don't think that they're certainly looking at what has happened over the first 9 games of the year and feeling like it is the start they want to get off on. And that may be the understatement of the show, and we are about 30 seconds in. But we are going to try to unpack the many factors that are at play as the Braves have stumbled out of the gates. In fact, it feels like they've fallen flat on their face with the trip out west going 0-7, coming home, seeming to get right against the Marlins, only to revert back to an offense that was unable to solve a pitching staff that is not among the best in baseball. And I think that's the differentiator here. You look at what happened in San Diego, you look at what happened in Los Angeles. You can look at those rosters and look at those teams and say, okay, it's going to be some pretty tough sledding. But the Miami Marlins, I do think, are a club that here in the early going, as they are currently, 5-4, have figured out a way to win a few ball games. They beat up on the Pirates to get started with, but then they gave the Mets a pretty good run, and now they've come in and have a chance, depending on what the weather is on Sunday, to take a series from the Atlanta Braves behind Sandy Alcantara. Don't want to get ahead of ourselves, though. We have to kind of, I think, look back at one of the more frustrating weeks of Braves baseball in recent memory, and that's saying a lot considering what we went through last year, and some of the playoff exits certainly feel differently. That kind of stuff is, I think, in its own category. But in terms of regular season, could it go wrong? Will it go wrong? It has gone wrong. The first week or so for the Braves thus far has been that. The bullpen has been shaky, but I would probably put that down further on the list of things to really be concerned about. Losing Jurickson Profar to a performance-enhancing drug suspension, you can put that near the top of the list, and potentially losing Reynaldo Lopez for the entire season to a shoulder injury. You can put that up pretty high on that list, but the 0-7 start, the way that it happened, the inability of the offense to be able to string things together to come up with a big hit. Stop me if you've heard this before, but it just feels like the storylines of the 2024 Braves have followed them into 2025, and I don't think anybody, the Braves included, wanted to see anything like that. I think they were hoping to have a little bit more good fortune on their side at the very least, and I think a lot of this will come down to controlling the controllables. And what do I mean by that? Well, you're not going to be able to turn the season around in one at bat. One inning, one game, whatever the case may be. I mean, one game can help if you start winning them and stack them up. Yes, obviously that can be a little bit different. But I feel like from a mindset perspective, that's where the Braves are really going to have to dig in and, as they say, do the work. Because I don't think it's a physical thing with this group. I've been talking about this on 92.9 The Game for the last, 10 or so days. I joined my buddies on Foul Territory TV this week and tried to make sense of what was going on with the Braves. And I said something there that I felt like, you know what, I need to dive into that on the show. And for those who maybe didn't catch that or didn't follow me on social media, which you can on most platforms, at Grant McAuley, what exactly could turn it around? What could help them turn it around? From a mindset perspective, I really feel like the minimalist approach is what I'm calling it. The small little things that add up in a baseball game or in a given day, no matter what you're doing, really. And I'm a big believer in mindset. But obviously there's a physical aspect of sports that has to happen as well. I mean, you have to be able to perform in those moments. And it just feels like, I don't know that the moments are too big, but there's an aggressiveness, there's a pressing feeling from some of the Braves' best hitters. And I can't blame them because, number one, they're human. And number two, you look at the results, and who wouldn't want to go up there and try to turn things around, whether that's in an inning, in a game, for a season, whatever the case is. And again, stop me if you've heard this before, but this was the story I felt like, at least part of it, for the 2024 Braves. Yes, injuries, that's one thing. Let's put that over here to the side. We can all agree that that was about as far from ideal as it could possibly be. But now they're kind of back in that boat from an offensive standpoint where, yes, they don't have Ronald Acuña Jr. back, and we'll get into that a little bit later in the show. That will help, I believe. How could it not? He's one of the best players in baseball. But the Braves have got a lot of things to do to get themselves in position to get him back in there and really start to, I think, assemble their season the way that they wanted to. It's almost like, as a baseball fan, I'll throw this back. And as somebody who just loves nostalgia, grew up in the 80s, the 90s, where I feel like we had the best toys. We had the best stuff. I can't speak for what's going on today. It seems a lot more digital, a lot more devices, whatnot. But imagine you got the absolute coolest Lego set of all time, and it did not come with the instructions. That's what opening day, opening week, the first, 9 games of the season feels like for the Atlanta Braves. They've got all the pieces. Well, they had all the pieces. They've lost a couple of them. But they're not able to put it together because they just haven't had the blueprint for that or just haven't been able to find it. I don't know. I don't know how far this analogy can go, but I think you get what I'm saying is nice, shiny new toy, and we're just not able to assemble this thing and really start enjoying it. And that's kind of what it's been like. It's been a false start for the season to the Braves. There's just no two ways about that. And we're going to dive into all of it. We'll talk about the road trip some, and not so much the 0-7 part, which I think we can all agree is about as not ideal as it gets, but the Jurickson Profar suspension. I mean, that's something that the Braves are going to be unpacking and working through here for a while. What kind of player are you going to be getting back on the other side of that? We're going to have to delve into that because I think it's a realistic question to ask. Did the Jurickson Profar that had a career year last year really have a career year? Or did he have a little bit of help that maybe made him look like a better player than he actually is? You look at the back of the baseball card, as the old saying goes, 2024 is unlike any other season that he had. Now, could he have done some things that helped him put together a good year? Sure. At the plate? Yes. Made adjustments? Sure. But now all of that is thrown into question, and I think it's fair to ask how exactly 2024 was put together. Was it ill-gotten gains for Jurickson Profar, and did that then turn into a 3-year contract with the Braves that they're going to be looking at, scratching their heads and wondering, how do we get ourselves into this? And well, the answer is perhaps false advertising. But again, I don't want to get ahead of myself. The Jurickson Profar story, though, is a very big story and a very big loss for the Braves because they were hoping to have some continuity at the top of the order, somebody to get on base, somebody to help set the tone, somebody to bring in some energy, some vibes, as they say. Those were the boxes Jurickson Profar was supposed to check, and he has pretty much come in and managed to do the exact opposite by A, getting suspended, and B, the fallout from all of that. That doesn't provide the kind of vibes that you want for a season. And that's just one more thing that the Braves will have to put out of sight, out of mind, because Profar is going to be out of sight and out of mind for about 80 games, and then figure out what it is you can do on the other side of this to put together your outfield. That's just one of the many stories here over the first, week and a half of the season now. But not only are these losses piling up on the field, but the Braves are 1-8 after dropping Saturday's game to the Marlins. They've lost Jurickson Profar in what I can only describe as, and if you know me for a long time, I use this word not too frequently, but enough for it to be one of my signature words. It's been a debacle as far as Profar is concerned. But where does the club go from here in the outfield and at leadoff? We're going to have to get into all of that because Ronald Acuña Jr., spoiler alert, is probably still about a month away from returning. We'll see when that timetable comes into focus, and we'll talk about some of the news, the updates for Ronald this week as we go along. But as if the Profar news wasn't enough, the Braves also lost Reynaldo Lopez after just one start due to a shoulder ailment, the extent of which is not known. Reynaldo's going to head out to Los Angeles on Tuesday. He'll go under the knife, I guess, for arthroscopic surgery. So maybe not as much of the knife, but you get where I'm going with this. They're going to have to figure out and assess what exactly is wrong with his shoulder and whether or not he's going to pitch again this year is a big question the Braves are going to be asking come Tuesday. I mean, they're already asking it, but maybe they'll find out their answer. That kind of loss in a rotation that was already waiting on Spencer Strider to get back, which we should have some good stuff to discuss on him at least later on if you're looking for the silver linings of today's show. Spencer Strider certainly could be one of those, but Max Fried leaves, Charlie Morton leaves, Reynaldo Lopez is hurt. That decimates a rotation when you lose those kind of talents. And while you understood coming into spring training that Fried and Morton were no longer part of this equation, you were banking on Chris Sale, on Reynaldo Lopez, and Spencer Schwellenbach to lead this rotation, get Strider back in there, and then you feel pretty good. I mean, I talked about this, a week, 2 weeks ago on the show? You feel pretty good about that quartet, and you can figure it out at 5, whether that's Grant Holmes or A.J. Smith-Shawver or somebody else. But without Reynaldo Lopez, it kind of upsets the very delicate balance of what the Braves' rotation is and what you need from that rotation. And I know that it doesn't necessarily work this way, but how can it not if you're a fan? The expectations for Spencer Strider probably expanded just a bit when Lopez hit the injured list. And he's been transferred already to the 60-day IL, so you know he's going to be out for a while. But we'll see exactly how all of that plays out. And I know you've heard this stat. How could you not have? If you've been on social media, if you've listened to a Braves broadcast, if you've listened to pretty much any baseball talk anywhere in the civilized world over the past week, you've heard about the 0-7 stat that the Braves have had slapped on their season like a bumper sticker you just don't want. No team in baseball history has started 0-7 and made the postseason. Now, I'm going to throw a caveat out there, thanks to my buddy C.J. Nitkowski, who was on the show last week. And if you missed that, you can find From the Diamond wherever you get your podcast. Check out that archive. You can also hear it on the Odyssey app. But C.J. did some digging, or somebody did some digging for him. I don't know. But he shared it anyway, so I'm going to give him the credit for it. Plenty of teams have made the playoffs having a 7-game losing streak at some point in their season, which to me, as a baseball person, as somebody who's into sample sizes and context, all right, I can get behind that. 85 different times a club has made the postseason after having a losing streak of 7 or more games at some point during their season. That makes you feel a little bit better. The 0-7 start, though, that points to, I think, clubs that, and you can look at the teams that the Braves have had in their history that have started off 0-6 or worse. None of them had playoff aspirations that I can remember, whether you're talking about 2016 or certainly 1988, where they went 0-10 to start the season, 1980, which that's when I checked into the world, so I didn't get to watch that season particularly close. So, it's just one of those things where they're going to have to figure it out. They've got some time to do so, but time is of the essence to stop digging that hole deeper and deeper and deeper. Coming up on the show, we'll dive into This Week in Braves Baseball. I'll be joined by Scott Coleman of Hammer Territory a little bit later to cover it all, and we'll take a deeper look at the Miami Marlins, a team in a perpetual rebuild, and Craig Mish will help us get up to speed on what to expect from that division rival as we go along here on From the Diamond. Up next, This Week in Braves Baseball, I'm Grant McAuley. This is Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Now, more From the Diamond with Grant McAuley. Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer from Mark Spain Real Estate. 855-299-SOLD. On Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back into From the Diamond on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. I am Grant McAuley. These are the Kia Studios, and this is Sports Radio 92.9 The Game as we continue along on From the Diamond with This Week in Braves Baseball. And I wish it was a week that was filled with much more fun topics to talk about, because all of that, the rites of spring where hope springs eternal, didn't last very long in the 2025 regular season, unfortunately for the Braves, who find themselves heading into Sunday's finale with the Miami Marlins on a 1-8 record, thanks in large part to what they're not doing at the plate. We can pick apart some of the other things, and trust me, we certainly will. And some of the reasons why maybe things aren't working for the lineup, and some other areas that need improvement for the Braves that maybe haven't been able to do what they've wanted to do or need to do, as the case may be. But I think it all starts with the offense. You outscore the other guys, you win baseball games. You have trouble scoring, it's going to be difficult to win baseball games. And to say that the Braves are having trouble scoring is probably the understatement of the season thus far. This is a club batting .193 as a collective through 9 games. On-basing under 300, slugging under 300. They're also on-basing under 300, so I guess both of those are correct. An OPS overall for the team of .577. I mean, you're getting into the level where I think you used to call that good-hitting pitcher would bat somewhere around 200, maybe on base somewhere just under 300, and slug every once in a while a few homers, and maybe they would be able to handle the bat well. You can't have a lineup full of that, though, and the Braves are pretty much looking at that, because outside of Marcell Ozuna and perhaps Matt Olson, the two guys that I think have shown the most in the early going, and certainly as far as batted ball profiles, are the two guys swinging the bat the best, with the third man on the list, despite the fact he's batting .154, catcher Drake Baldwin has also, I think, been impressive with his approach at the plate. But how much longer will he be part of the equation is a question that we're going to have to ask, because Sean Murphy is nearing a return from AAA Gwinnett in his rehab assignment. So we'll stick a pin in that discussion. But the offense overall, outside of their 10 runs that they scored on Friday night, and we call this cherry picking, but follow me. In the other 8 games of the season, the Braves have scored 14 runs total. That is 1.75 runs per game that the Braves have scored over the course of those other 8 games. And, of course, you might gather from that all of those losses. That 10-0 win on Friday does feel like a bit of an outlier thus far this season. There's no two ways about that. Can the Braves find a way to tap into that kind of run scoring? Doesn't have to be 10 runs, but manufacturing some runs would certainly go a long way. And it just feels like, again, that pressing has been part of the issue. And I think Ozzie Albies is somebody that typically gets pointed to in these situations where early in the count, ultra-aggressive, jumping on pitches, and not making a productive out, or just not being able to come through in those moments. And even when things are starting to maybe spiral and get out of control a little bit for the pitcher, you let these guys off the hook when you jump up there hunting early in the count and trying to force something to happen. That feels like just part of the equation here. And look, it's a hard game. Was it Ted Williams that said the hardest thing to do in sports is to hit a round ball with a round bat squarely? And that has certainly rung true for the Braves this year. But you look up and down this lineup, there's just not a lot to write home about here. You don't know in the leadoff spot. I guess Michael Harris is going to be getting that shot. He's been swinging the bat better lately. Let's throw him into the mix as far as guys who are showing some signs of life. Harris has moved to the leadoff spot, had a 3-hit night on Friday, banged out another double on Saturday. He's 8 for 33, though, hitting .242. You got Marcell Ozuna batting .240, but he's walked 13 times. That leads all of baseball. Matt Olson's batting .233, but then Austin Riley, .143. Jared Kelenic, .154. Drake Baldwin, .154. Ozzie Albies, .194. Jurickson Profar, before he got suspended, although he just played in 4 games, was only hitting .200. And Orlando Arcia has been supplanted at shortstop, at least here in the early going, by Nick Allen, who's had a handful of hits and puts up a good professional at bat, but, he's not been brought in for the offense. And the Braves need to find the offense from the guys that you're expecting it to come from. That's Olson, that's Albies, that's Riley, that's Ozuna, that's Harris. Those are the guys who are going to have to do some heavy lifting right now. And I'll talk to Scott Coleman of Hammer Territory in a little bit about all of that, because it feels like the Braves outfield, obviously, with no Acuña yet, and with Profar now out of the mix, is going to be a group that I don't know that outside of Harris, you're really going to be able to count on altogether that much. So it went very quickly from a group that when you talked to Ronald back in spring training, when it was going to be him and Harris and Profar, could be among the best in baseball, to a group that you're just trying to piece together right now until you can get Ronald Acuña Jr. back. But Atlanta got home after nearly 2 months on the road. They went to do spring training, obviously, then went out to Arizona, played a couple of Cactus League games, and then it was San Diego and L.A. And I think the Braves needed to get back home. And all of the guys that I talked to on Friday before this Marlins series began, they felt energized. And that obviously didn't show through on Saturday, but the club needs some energy. And where they're going to get that from, who's going to provide that spark, especially offensively, I think that's fair to question right now. But when you get into the Jurickson Profar of it all, that PED suspension for HCG, which is a fertility drug, if you do the same thing I did and start Googling and figuring out, all right, well, why would he have tested positive for that? It's also used as a masking agent, which restarts the production of testosterone naturally in the body after you've used something, typically after steroids, to basically get things kick-started again. Either way, whatever the case is for this, there's no silver lining here. Profar is their one big get of the winter. He's out half the year. He's also ineligible for the postseason, though right now when you're sitting at 1-8 coming out of the gates to start the season, October's a long ways away. And I don't know that we need to spend a whole lot of time on that on the show just yet. But you're not going to have them available to you at a time when, obviously, you want everybody you can possibly have. So the question becomes, where do the Braves turn in this outfield? Jared Kelenic and Brian De La Cruz are already up. They're going to get first crack at it. But beyond that, Alex Verdugo debuted for Gwinnett over the weekend as well. And maybe he'll factor into this. But Verdugo, a talented outfielder, I think. Coming off a down year in 2024, though. But a fiery competitor, maybe that will provide a little bit of spark here. But he just now debuted at AAA over the weekend. How soon could he be here? How many at-bats does he need to get up to speed? Because I think we know at this point, if you miss spring training, you're kind of behind the 8 ball, and you don't want to be playing catch-up on the job at the big league level. Not too many guys succeed at doing that. But Verdugo could factor into this thing as well. But you can't discuss the outfield without bringing up Ronald Acuña Jr., who is going to be flying out to Los Angeles. He's going to talk with doctors soon and kind of get the final sign-off on really being able to ramp up his running. And what does that mean? Yes, he's been running, he's been working out, he's been hitting, he's been doing some work in the outfield, though not full bore yet. He needed to be cleared to be able to cut, change directions quickly, and do all the things that a high-performance athlete, great base runner, and a major league outfielder is going to need to be able to do and feel really confident about that. So hopefully that's just getting that signed off on and getting him into some games, because it's going to take Ronald a little while to get up to speed as well, because the Braves did make that decision. They were not going to push him in spring training. They wanted to make absolute certain that when he got back on the field and started playing games, that he was completely and totally as ready as you can be for that. And hopefully that's going to be happening very soon. Could he be back in early, maybe mid-May? I think that seems logical if he's able to get that 3-week rehab assignment under his belt. And, I don't think they're going to change the timeline whatsoever for him based on the start for the team. I think that'd be irresponsible to do that. The only way that I would imagine Ronald Acuña Jr. gets back maybe a little bit earlier than that timetable I mentioned, again, first week, maybe second week of May, would be if he just simply checks all the boxes. He's absolutely raking and feels good, and he's gotten an ample amount of at-bats for you to feel confident about making that decision. That's on the table. But we're still about a month away from being able to really, I think, factor Ronald Acuña Jr. into this equation. The Braves bats were busy on Friday, then they got back into that grind on Saturday, and signs of life from Michael Harris, I think, were encouraging, as I talked about that. In that 3-hit game for him against the Marlins, he was robbed of a 4th hit in that one as well. You needed to see Michael doing a little something there. He drew his first walk of the season on Saturday, also had a double, so 1 for 3 there. But not a lot was going on for him on the road trip. He had a 2-hit game against the Dodgers. He homered against the Dodgers back on the 31st of March, but the offense for their center fielder and leadoff hitter right now would go a long way towards sparking this lineup, setting the table. Michael Harris, I think, is capable of doing that. He was caught stealing on Saturday, but I think maybe you see what you can do up there with that. If you need to get something kick-started, Harris is one of the few guys on the team where I would sign off on saying, yeah, give him a perpetual green light and see if he can pick the right spots, steal some bases. I think it's him, it's Albies, to a lesser extent, maybe Jared Kelenic. Eli White's probably the fastest guy on the team, but I don't know that he's going to be, stealing a lot of playing time, getting a lot of starts, and having the opportunity to do it. But if it's late and close and you need a base stolen, at least you got a guy that can do that as well. And maybe you're just going to have to get creative when you're in the midst of a slump. And the Braves are a team that is built to slug, and they have been in the past. I mean, ideally speaking, if you look at the blueprint, built to get on base and built to slug. But the getting on base part's not happening as much as it needs to, and certainly the slug part is not happening as much as it needs to either. Because you look at, some of these games where I think the Braves had in their first, 7 games of the season, 6 hits with runners in scoring position. And then on Friday, when they won 10-0 against the Marlins, they proceeded to have 7 hits with runners in scoring position, only to come back and put up a goose egg on Saturday, getting shut out by Cal Quantrill and the Marlins bullpen, which, again, is not among the toughest pitching staffs in baseball. So, trying to make sense of this, I think you just kind of drive yourself crazy, because ultimately I think it comes down to relaxing, trusting who you are, trusting the work, and doing all the cliche things that baseball players will tell you all the time. But I'm just going to point it out. That stuff does matter. You cannot force things to happen, no matter how badly you want to. And I think that that's at least part of this equation for why the Braves are having such a hard time scoring runs right now. But the big bats are going to have to start doing that work. Matt Olson, I think, is swinging the bat very well. But then there's Austin Riley, who this past week, I read the quotes, I think it was Wednesday's game, about as dejected as I feel like I've ever heard Austin Riley from an individual perspective in terms of his performance alone. Yep, sure, you're disappointed when you lose playoff series and that kind of thing, sure. But, we're talking about the first week of April. So to hear somebody that down about it and taking responsibility as much as you can for it, you realize there's self-awareness, but it doesn't necessarily change the results. That's just going to happen with work. It's going to happen with reps. And Austin Riley is a much better player overall. I don't know if you need me to tell you this, but I'll tell you this anyway, than he has shown over the first week and a half of this season. He's been streaky, no doubt. But this is a guy that, when hot, can carry the team for a month. And the Braves need somebody to get hot and help carry this team for a month. And that somebody should probably end up eventually being someone other than Marcell Ozuna, who it feels like has been doing it for the better part of a year or more with the numbers that he has put up. But it's not just Austin Riley here. Ozzie Albies, Matt Olson, Michael Harris. If you get Sean Murphy back in this mix, that could help out as well. There are a lot of bats you can point to, and obviously Marcell Ozuna right there in the middle of all of it, that could give this lineup some serious punch, but it's just not happening right now. And I don't know that there's an easy way to fix it, and it's certainly not fire the hitting coach, fire the manager, fire the GM, rebuild the team. But that seems to be, just based on social media, which is what it is, an echo chamber of frustrated fans who can look at that record and have every right to be frustrated about it. But the clear path to fixing it all, it's not blowing up the team and starting over, though it might feel like that at times. This is not a case of, I fell behind in this game, I'm going to turn off the system, turn it back on, and start a new game. If it's that easy, I can promise you, nobody recognizes it more than the Braves. They'd love to be able to hit that reset button and go back to late March and start this whole thing over again, but it just doesn't work that way. And they're going to have to get outside of that. I mentioned that Nick Allen was getting some run at shortstop, with Orlando Arcia taking a seat quite a bit lately. He's not exactly an offensive force, but he can play a pretty good shortstop. He's a good base runner, and you can look at the at-bats that he puts up, and typically he's going to grind them out. But you saw, I think, on Saturday, and this is certainly not to pick on Nick Allen because he's not the feature bat in this lineup, opportunities with runners on base for him. And that's not the guy that you want up there in those spots. But the Braves have got to sort some things out, most certainly. And shortstop is one place where I think opportunity is there, and why wouldn't it be? Allen has gotten, 5 games, 19 at-bats for him. You look at Orlando Arcia, 4 games, 13 at-bats for him, a couple of singles and 5 punch-outs for Orlando, who defensively speaking, I don't know that there's too much of a difference between the two, but you're just not going to get a lot of offense because that's just not who these guys are. But you need the other guys in the lineup to be doing what they can do so that you can feel okay about your defensive shortstop being a defense-first player. Or you got to go out and address that position, and I think in season, maybe that's something that the Braves will consider and be able to get done. Meanwhile, Sean Murphy could be back as soon as Tuesday against the Phillies. He was in the Braves clubhouse over the weekend. I saw him on Saturday. Braves are off on Monday, and then they welcome the Philadelphia Phillies to town on Tuesday. So it's not going to get any easier for the Braves. They desperately need a series win over the weekend if they can get it done against Sandy Alcantara and the Marlins. And then they'll welcome Bryce Harper and the Phillies to town for what is sure to be just the latest test for a team that has been under pressure for the first week and a half of the season. All right, coming up, Scott Coleman joins me next on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Back to Grant McAuley for more From the Diamond. Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer from Mark Spain Real Estate, 855-299-SOLD on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back into From the Diamond with Grant McAuley here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game, live from the Kia Studios on a Sunday morning as we continue our Braves discussion in what has been a very up and down start to the season, with a lot more down than I think anybody had anticipated for a club that has the kind of aspirations that the Braves do of being a playoff contender. Those are not completely out the window, but if you were on social media for any length of time, or really if you followed the first couple of series of the year, you might have heard that the Braves had dug themselves a hole that was going to be pretty difficult to get out of with their 0-7 start, but nonetheless, they have found their way into the win column and have a gracious plenty amount of games left in the season to do that maybe 90, 95 more times and punch that ticket to October. But putting all of that aside, we're going to parse through what has been a challenging and a very unexpected start to the season with Scott Coleman of Hammer Territory. We got a lot to dive into. Some of it finally is good, but man, this has been quite a start to the Braves season, and I don't think it was a start that anybody really predicted.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Grant. You know, this was as tough of an opening week that you're going to see schedule-wise for the Braves. And you think about not only being down in Florida for 6 weeks for spring training, then they go out to Arizona for a couple of games in the Cactus League, and then play 7 games back-to-back against the Padres and the Dodgers, who probably had a claim to being the 2 best rosters in baseball just a year ago. Far away from home, I'm sure those guys were jonesing to get back to their families in Atlanta. And fingers crossed, that's kind of a sign of things to come for the team moving forward.
Yeah, and there's something to be said about exactly, what you brought up, which was the competition. You have to certainly look at that. That's one factor. The Braves didn't just go out there 7 times and beat themselves. Could they have played better? Most definitely. I know you've talked a lot about it. I know I've talked a lot about it. So it was a challenging road trip in a variety of different ways, but having the right team, maybe waiting for them when they come home, nothing against the Marlins, but there's a little bit difference, a bit of a difference in that roster and perhaps the Dodgers and Padres that we could get into on another edition of the show. But timing, of course, is everything. The opponent is certainly part of the equation here that you've always got to factor in. But this challenging start, it was by just about every measure because it added up to 0-7 on the road, but the losses obviously felt beyond the box score. So let's unpack the road trip a little bit before we enjoy the homecoming tale, because it did feel a lot like Murphy's Law. The Braves lost 7 games. Their offense was listless for much of that trip before finally coming to life over the weekend against Miami. They were counting on Jurickson Profar to produce at the top of the order to start the year. Now we won't see him again until midseason, and all bets are off on what version of Jurickson Profar we're going to see at that point. So, Scott, let me ask you, what was your read and, I guess, reaction to that situation now that we've had some time to digest the 80-game suspension of Profar?
It's obviously really deflating that you lose a player who was really the one and only big offseason addition for the Braves. So now you're going to lose him half the season. You lose his on base at the top of the lineup. And you said it perfectly, for a player who was coming off a career year at age 30, has been around for a decade, and now he gets popped for PEDs. I think it's only natural to kind of wonder aloud if maybe there was something going on. I know that Profar said that last year he was tested 8 times during his breakout. And obviously players get tested all the time, but just the timing of it all. is maybe something that makes you raise an eyebrow. And we'll just kind of have to cross our fingers and hope that when Profar comes back in July, that he's close or at least somewhat a shell of the player he was last year, because clearly the Braves liked him enough to invest $42 million over the next 3 seasons.
Yeah, and hearing from Alex Anthopoulos, I mean, not only did the Braves think a lot of Profar, but, there was a sizable difference between the hitter available at the top of the board for free agents over the winter and Juan Soto. There's only one of those, and a lot of the other guys. But the Braves really liked Profar, and they felt like the changes in the underlying metrics added up to a player that they felt like could replicate that kind of success. And now, as you mentioned, I mean, you do have to wonder, and wonder aloud with a lot of these things. I mean, working with Fernando Tatis and his father, as far part of what he was saying helped him turn things around. Well, obviously, Tatis has his own story with this kind of stuff, so you wonder about that. And then you look at, okay, sure, you had the 8 tests, and obviously you were able to get clear of those 8 tests last year. However, what he got popped for is something that's used, by and large, it seems like, as a masking agent in order to, I think, get around those kinds of tests. So, this is nothing new. This is not the first time that we've seen this in baseball. It's been an ongoing thing that has really tapered down. But the disappointment, to your point, I don't think there's any way around that. It's going to really color Profar in a way that, and his statement was fascinating, and I'd love your thoughts on this, about loving the fact that he could be a fan-favorite player. Scott, I don't know if he's going to be a fan-favorite player anytime soon, at least not in Atlanta.
Yeah, it's not the best start to Profar's time at the Braves. And, in all of his media calls whenever the Braves signed him, I thought Profar just kind of naturally endeared himself to the fan base, has a $1 million smile, talked about his son being a Braves fan and how much they wanted to get to Atlanta. But, of course, not even a full week into his official time with the team, he gets popped for 80 games. And I think there was a lot of talk this week about just kind of the honor and integrity of baseball. And whenever you have a player, an established player like Profar, get popped for PEDs, I think everyone kind of has a bad feeling in their stomach about it. So we'll see. Well, I'm curious. I mean, without knowing the dynamics of a clubhouse with a lot of rich and longtime baseball players, you won't want to pretend like you're going to know the dynamic inside the clubhouse when Profar comes back. You would hope that these guys are able to continue to coexist and welcome Profar back with open arms, because the Braves are going to need him. And the PED is an ugly start, but there will be about 2.5 years left on that contract when he's able to play again. And you just have to hope that he's able to be a productive player and give the Braves what they obviously liked in him so much, to invest that kind of money and commitment to him over the next 3 years.
Yeah, that's certainly what the Braves are hoping for. Chatting with Scott Coleman here on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. He joins me on the WadeFord.com hotline. Scott, of course, one of the hosts of the Hammer Territory podcast, which covers the Braves on a regular basis. Let me segue into something that's a bit of a wait and see right now, but of the good variety. Ronald Acuña Jr. We anticipate he'll be back in a month or so. His impact will be felt across the board, and until then, the outfield may not have that same power potential, of course. I think that the Braves are now depending more so, I believe, on Matt Olson, Austin Riley, and Ozzie Albies, that infield, to kind of return to its prior glory, if you will, of 2023. And honestly, just the normal or regular numbers that you can expect out of those guys over the course of a season. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the established veterans on this team are really going to be relied on to help carry the load until Ronald comes back. And we've seen probably mixed results for that trio. I think with Matt Olson, he had a big home run on Friday night. Matt has hit the ball hard really the entire season so far, just hasn't had a ton to show for it in terms of results, but I think that's something with time that'll balance out. Austin Riley, following the loss on Wednesday night, publicly was as disappointed, I think, that I can remember hearing Austin talk. Talking about that he needs to be better, that the team needs him to be better, and just a real frustration at the lack of results. He had a home run on opening day, and since then he had really struggled. I think it's only a matter of time until he gets going, but clearly the Braves need Austin Riley. And then Ozzie Albies has come along a little bit too. I think we know when Ozzie is right, he's really hitting for power and is just kind of a dynamic force in the middle of the lineup. We will see how it all shakes out with lineups with Brian Snitker, especially while Ronald Acuña is down. But I agree completely that trio, and then, of course, Marcell Ozuna, what he does out of the DH spot, those 4 players are really going to be leaned on here until they get Acuña back.
Yeah, and I want to get into Marcell Ozuna in just a moment, but just to kind of follow up on what I think most people believe upon, viewing the Braves or really being a fan of baseball for a lengthy period of time anyway, is this offense can't be as bad as it was for the first week over the entire season, but when all the numbers you have are not great, then it's hard to see the potential in that moment, at least for some. But the Braves seem to feel that they'll get this all sorted out. Talked to quite a few of them prior to the series against the Marlins getting started, and history dictates that they're going to be better at the plate. I think the question, Scott, that we're kind of wondering, based on maybe the highs of 2023 and the lows of 2024, is how much better can this group get?
It is a fascinating question, Grant. And I think when you look back at 2023, across the board, everybody had, if not a career best season, but something really close to it. And then, of course, last year, it seemed like outside of the injuries, even when players were healthy, other than Marcell Ozuna, everybody had a down year offensively. And you would feel like there's going to be some equilibrium here at some point. But I think especially when the Braves are coming off such a frustrating 2024 season, the fact that the offense struggled so much in that opening week, I think everybody kind of looked around and said, here we go again. The team really struggled hitting with runners in scoring position. And as we've seen, really not just the last couple of years, but during this entire run, when the Braves are hitting home runs, they have no trouble scoring. But I think we want to get to a point where the Braves are not quite so reliant on the long ball and have those innings where they can string together 3 or 4 hits and put a crooked number up. Because some nights you're just not going to run into a homer, and it'd be nice to see the Braves put together good at-bats and put the ball in play a little bit more, not be so home run reliant in order to score more than a couple of runs to support your pitching staff.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And somebody who's been helping them score some runs over the course of the last couple of years is Marcell Ozuna. He's off to an incredible start, a quirky start, though, and once again, the feature bat, I think, in the middle of this order. And a couple of years ago this time, it's crazy to think that we were wondering how much longer can the Braves possibly hold on to this guy. But since then, Scott, we've been asking a very different question, which is, where would the Braves be without Marcell Ozuna? And quite frankly, he's at it again this year.
Yeah, Marcell's turnaround, I mean, legitimately, Grant, you remember, his career was on the ropes. We were talking about, are the Braves going to move on? And right before Marcell started to turn things around in that series down in Miami, he had been benched for a couple of games. And it was like, is this the end? Even for a player who has a long track record of being good and was owed a lot of money on the contract. And since then, Marcell has been one of the truly best hitters in baseball. And it's a testament to Marcell that he's continued to work. And you talk about the impact he has on this lineup. The on-base was really good. And then on Friday night, we saw him start to hit for power, which we know is so much part of his game. Had the home run. So really encouraging signs for a player who the Braves are really going to lean on in the middle of the order. And I think in a perfect world, you have Marcell batting 3rd or 4th and driving in 1,000,000 runs this summer. And especially once you get Acuña back at the top and hopefully get this lineup back to the levels that it was in 2023 when it was one of the very best in the game.
Yeah, and the Braves definitely need that offense to back up what has been a pitching staff that did the heavy lifting for them a year ago just to get them into the postseason, but has been, I would say, under construction in a lot of ways, beginning back in the winter and now running right on through the early portion of the year, because not only did Max Fried and Charlie Morton move on over the offseason, but now Reynaldo Lopez is down for a considerable amount of time. We just don't know how long yet, but there are some good things there, obviously. Chris Sale's the reigning Cy Young winner. I think he's looked pretty good his first couple of starts. I anticipate him continuing to be Chris Sale. And then you've got Spencer Schwellenbach, who was magnificent on Friday. And to me, Scott, it's not just about what Spencer Schwellenbach does, but it's how he does it that impresses me. This is about as well-rounded a young pitcher as I can remember seeing at any point in any time that I've either covered the Braves or followed the Braves in terms of young pitcher. And we've seen some pretty great ones put on a Braves uniform, but it's the youth and the acumen that he's put together here that makes him stand out.
Yeah, Schwellenbach is incredible. And the way that he is incredible is so fascinating to watch because you're talking about a player who barely had any kind of minor league career as a college draftee who needed Tommy John shortly after being drafted. And Schwellenbach comes up and he has full command of 5 pitches. There was a national writer on Friday night who made a claim that Schwellenbach might have the best command of any pitcher in the major leagues. That's crazy to talk about. And it's also not like Schwellenbach is up there throwing 90-mile-an-hour sinkers. he can pump 98 when he needs it. He has that wicked breaking ball. He has a changeup. I mean, it seems like no matter what the count is, whether it's 0-2 or 3-0, Schwellenbach has something that he can throw with confidence over the plate. And as a result, the Miami Marlins over 8 innings on Friday night did not barrel a single baseball. That's crazy. Yeah. And this kid, it feels like Schwellenbach's getting better with every start, and the sky is truly the limit. And if you can get to a point where you have a healthy and firing Sale, Schwellenbach, and Strider, the Braves are going to win a lot of games this summer.
And their rotation is going to be a big part of that. And Spencer Strider, worth noting as well, on Friday, he was dominant for AAA Gwinnett in his second rehab start, and his return. But if anything could help this rotation get right, adding an arm like that to Sale and figuring things out on the back end would put Atlanta in a much better position despite the loss of Lopez, who will be out again for a time yet to be determined. Well, Scott, I appreciate you making the time for me here on a Sunday morning. Let everybody know about Hammer Territory, where we can find it, and how we can follow along with you and all the work you guys are doing as well.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on, Grant. Terrific job covering the team. If folks want to tune in, we run a podcast called Hammer Territory. It's backed by the fine folks at Foul Territory, where a couple of former Braves actually host daily shows with A.J. Pierzynski and Cameron Maben and a couple others. So Hammer Territory, available both on YouTube if you want to watch, and also wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, etc. And yeah, Grant, let's hope end here and the Braves kind of get back on track to where we want them to be.
Well, with that, hour one of From the Diamond is in the books. When we come back, we will turn our attention to what else is happening across Major League Baseball as we take our trip around the big leagues. It comes your way next on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Taking a look around the league with more of our From the Diamond with Grant McAuley. From the Diamond is brought to you by Window Nation. Get 2 windows free with every 2 you buy and pay nothing for 2 years on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back in to From the Diamond on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. I am Grant McAuley, live from the Kia Studios on a Sunday morning as we embark on hour number 2 of the show, where we will take our look around the big leagues. I want to remind you, though, you can find From the Diamond wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you subscribe there. I would love it if you left me a rating and a review. That always helps out the show. And if you missed any of the big moments on the show, you can always check it out in the Odyssey app. Lots of different ways to connect to the show and connect to the station, so I encourage you to do any and all of those. Let's go with the latter, though. Use them all. Enjoy it. Not even in moderation. Let's get to our trip around the big leagues. Let's take a look at the way too early standings. I did want to do this a little bit throughout the year. I don't always get caught up in the standings. You know, as a longtime baseball person, I will tell you, if you ask me, okay, well, when do you start to get worried? When do you really start to, I don't know, get an idea of what exactly you have? And I tell you, as I do every single year, for every person that asks me, Memorial Day. But the wins in April count as much as the wins in May, June, July, September. The ones in October might be a little bit bigger based on the exchange rate, but we'll leave that there. You may not be able to win the division in April, but you can certainly lose it. And unfortunately, that has to be the way that the Braves are feeling right now. But we'll get back to that in a moment. Let's take a look at what's happening across the National League East. No surprise to see the Phillies off to their 6-2 start, sitting in first place. The New York Mets, who, of course, made a lot of headlines over the course of the offseason, bringing in Juan Soto, getting Pete Alonso back. They are 5-3, despite some of their pitching woes, pitching injuries, if you will. They've been able to find a way to at least get out to a moderately good start. And then there's the Marlins, who are sitting right smack in the middle of the division. They've got a couple of walk-off wins under their belt, 5-4 after beating the Braves on Saturday, and a chance to take a series from Atlanta, which, nope, we're not getting to the Braves next. We're getting to the Washington Nationals. They're 2-6. Not a great start for them either, but better than what the Braves are dealing with. 1-8 is the worst record in Major League Baseball, and there are a lot of reasons why, including the run-scoring woes for this team, which I'm going to get into once we take a look at a couple of other teams that have been allergic to run scoring this year. In the National League Central, the Cubs are already 7-4. Remember, they were part of that Tokyo series against the Los Angeles Dodgers back in spring training when we had opening day part 1, and then the rest of the league got to it about a week and a half later. Be that as it may, Cubs are 7-4. St. Louis Cardinals 4-3. They're an interesting story to watch this year because they really just sat on their hands over the course of the winter. There were a lot of questions about what that club's going to look like this year. They've got some young players. They've got some veteran players, but they seem to be at a bit of a crossroads in terms of whether or not they want to invest in this group and whether or not they were going to maybe pack it in and trade away members of this group. I mean, Paul Goldschmidt is gone. He was an MVP a couple of years ago. Didn't look like it last year. And Nolan Arenado was somebody that I think was very notably shopped over the course of the winter, but they didn't find a taker for him and his large contract, so he is back in St. Louis as well. But it's a long season, and that's a division that I think is going to be open for business, whether that's the Cubs, maybe the Cardinals, the Milwaukee Brewers 4-5 on the year. The Cincinnati Reds, though, were a pick for me that I kind of looked at and thought, okay, well, they got Terry Francona in there. They've got a young, up-and-coming roster led by Ellie De La Cruz. Maybe this is going to be a team to watch in 2025. In the early going, just 3-6 ahead of the Pittsburgh Pirates, who are 2-7 on the year, and they were the recipient of a couple of those Marlins walk-offs as well. But the Reds are a club that, you talk about run-scoring futility, the Braves have certainly felt it this year. But the Reds did something last week that had not been seen in baseball in 65 years. They lost 3 consecutive games by a 1-0 score. You talk about, and I don't know a lot about this, but you talk about wanting to pull your hair out over how your team's playing, lose 3 consecutive games by a 1-0 score. That's about as frustrating as it gets for the first week of April. And again, that did not happen since 1960, so that was before expansion, realignment, and the 162-game season, for that matter, as well. You remember, the first one of those was in 1961 because Roger Maris got the asterisk on his 61 home runs that year. So, little history lesson there for you. If it hasn't happened since before Roger Maris broke Babe Ruth's home run record, you're probably looking at something pretty futile in terms of the run scoring. But that's a look at the National League Central. Out in the West, the Dodgers are 9-1. They've hit 21 home runs already this year. Not surprising at all with the bomb squad that they have. Of course, they're without Freddie Freeman. We'll see how long that is. He slipped in the shower, getting into the shower, and tweaked that surgically repaired ankle. So they're going to be without him for a while. And, you know, Freddie's quite a gamer. You know, it's killing him to be on the sidelines. He doesn't like to miss any games, and that kind of fluky, weird injury, that can only just add to the frustration there. So hopefully he doesn't miss a ton of time. But the Dodgers, they're equipped pretty well to absorb the loss of one of their many star players. But hopefully Freddie will be back in the lineup sooner than later for his sake. San Francisco Giants, meanwhile, 7-1. They're in second place in the West. Padres 7-2. They've lost 2 games this year now. They got up to, of course, a perfect start as well before dropping a couple. Arizona Diamondbacks 5-4 on the year. The Colorado Rockies are 1-7, and that's a club that also is having an awful lot of trouble scoring runs, and that's typically not the case when you talk about the Rockies. Even without the big names, they've got Coors Field on their side. But the Rockies, through 8 games, have scored 18 runs. And that is the same run total of a team that you would not expect to find there when it comes to futility, and that's the Houston Astros. The Astros are 3-5 this year, but have scored just 18 runs across their 8 games. They're a team that's looking a bit different these days. We know that Alex Bregman moved on, went to the Boston Red Sox. Obviously, Jose Altuve in the outfield was a weird thing to get used to. A club kind of in transition. No more Justin Verlander there. Just some different looks for that team, but they started off with everybody wanting to shovel dirt on their grave in April of 2024, and all they did was overcome a really slow start and find their way back into October. So you can't rule anybody out at this point, I think, is probably the moral of the story. Now, speaking of a team that is having zero trouble scoring runs, that would be the New York Yankees, who have hit 25 home runs in 8 games. If you're scoring at home, that's a pace for 506 homers. That would be nearly 200 more than the 2023 Braves hit and the 2019 Twins hit to set the single-season record of 307. I don't know that the Yankees are going to get there, but with the way that the torpedo bat took over the baseball vernacular last week, we'll see what this looks like over the course of 162. It's, at the very least, it's tantalizing, and you wouldn't have thought that of all the teams that are going to get off to the great offensive start this year, the Yankees would be at or near the top of that list. All due respect to Aaron Judge, who is absolutely leading the way. They lost Juan Soto. Giancarlo Stanton is hurt, so you would have thought, oh, the Yankees offense, man, they're just going to have a tough time outside of Aaron Judge. That has not been the case. They're also on pace for 1,458 runs scored in the way too early projections here through 8 games. That's 9 runs per game. That's pretty good where I come from. That's pretty good for a slow-pitch softball team. Toronto Blue Jays are 5-4 behind the New York Yankees in the American League East. The Yanks are 6-2. Red Sox and Rays are both 4-4, and the Baltimore Orioles, who have had their own pitching problems to deal with this year, are 4-5 thus far. The American League Central, not much separation between all of these clubs. I mean, the White Sox, I don't think are going to be pushing for it, but I'm intrigued to see it because the Tigers were ahead of schedule last year getting into the postseason. Obviously, the Guardians did some good things under Stephen Vogt in his first year at the helm a year ago. Kansas City Royals are one of those young, exciting clubs to watch with Bobby Witt Jr. And then you got the Twins, who are a good team. I think they could be even better, but they're kind of in that purgatory of being on the market. Of course, they're looking to be sold. How much are they going to go for? About $1.5 billion if you're trying to scrape together the money. That could get you into the conversation, but I think that has them in a bit of a state of limbo in terms of what they might be doing to supplement that team. But again, I think this is a division that's kind of wide open, and any of those four teams could be in this playoff race all the way down to the wire. Out in the American League West, you got the Texas Rangers at 7-2. Los Angeles Angels with a resurgent Mike Trout. How about that? Who has homered in 3 straight games. Angels are 5-3, so trailing the Rangers, who are 7-2. Then you've got just the Athletics. They no longer have a city of origin. They've taken Oakland off of everything, obviously, as they've moved to Sacramento, though there still seems to be a lot of discussion about, are they going to stay in Sacramento for multiple years? I think there's still a conversation to be had, and I believe there is one, about whether or not this team ever makes it to Vegas. Is that whole thing going to come together? Is that ballpark going to get built? Are all of those hoops going to be jumped through? I still wonder, aloud, as I am right now on this show, if the Athletics don't end up somewhere else. But that we can put to the side to figure out at a time to be determined. But the Athletics 4-5 on the year. Houston Astros, again, 3-5. And the Mariners off to a 3-6 start. They, of course, have a really, really great pitching staff, but offense has been the question there. And that, of course, is where Braves hitting coach Kevin Seitzer went. But the Mariners having the same kind of trouble that the Braves are when it comes to the run-scoring department. But the Astros and the Rockies, 18 runs across their 8 games. So if you're wondering, the Braves, who scored 24 runs in their 9 games, it can get worse. Though, as I did point out, the Braves scored 10 of those 24 runs in one game, and you don't need me to do the math for you again, but I will anyway. Less than 2 runs per game and 8 losses ain't going to cut it. The Braves have got to figure out a way to score some more runs. Meanwhile, Jackson Merrill, who we saw in the opening series for the San Diego Padres and probably didn't want to see again for a while, he agreed to a 9-year, $135 million extension, one of many extensions that were given out over the course of this past week. You saw Ketel Marte, who just ended up on the injured list, agreeing to an extension with the Diamondbacks, I believe, on Friday. So some money being handed out and some extensions being handed out. But Merrill last year, 21 years old, .292, with 24 homers and 90 runs knocked in, also stole 16 bases and plays, I think, a pretty good center field for the Padres, even if that wasn't his natural position. But watching him in that first series, and I know I said this on social media, and so, I'm going to throw it out there again, reminds me so much of Freddie Freeman in the setup for his stance, his all-fields approach. Obviously, the power numbers kind of line up as well. A 290-plus hitter with 20-plus homer power, driving in 90 runs at 21, 22 years old. That tracks because that was Freddie Freeman back in the day. But then the contract, maybe this is just irony, 9 years, $135 million. First big extension for Jackson Merrill. Freddie Freeman's extension with the Braves, 8 years, $135 million. So another little, a stanza that rhymes, if you will. But Jackson Merrill, whether you want to throw the Freddie Freeman comp on him or not, is an extremely good young player, and the Padres are very happy to have him around for a long time to come. One more little bit of news before we get out of here. We got to update what's happening with Shohei Ohtani because, as you may know, Major League Baseball requires us to do so. No, I'm just kidding. But Shohei Ohtani, who does things that many Major League Baseball players can only dream of, could be back on the mound at some point in the coming weeks, maybe a month. There's no firm timetable in, but a 26-pitch bullpen session over the weekend that he reported feeling very good after. He has not pitched since 2023. He had the UCL brace procedure, the same deal that Spencer Strider went through. Didn't have Tommy John surgery, just had to go in and get the elbow worked on and get him, I guess, back in order, if you will, to be able to pitch at the level that he did, which, by the way, if you need a reminder, you saw him last year start the 50-50 club and do the things that you just really hadn't probably fathomed prior to that. And a thing or two was written about it. So he's an all-universe hitter. I think we all know that. He's also an all-star pitcher. So we're about to see if Ohtani can, turn the clock back a couple of years and make us all believe again in this player that's just capable of doing things the likes of which most of us never even imagined and probably couldn't even do in a video game. But that is the world Shohei Ohtani lives in, and perhaps he'll be back on the mound sooner than later for the Los Angeles Dodgers, who, if you're scoring at home, probably didn't need another superstar player to do superstar things, but they're going to get this guy to pull double duty. So that'll be interesting to watch, and we'll see how it all plays out for Ohtani. That's your look around the big leagues. Those some stories from the first week and a half, I guess, of the season. When we come back, though, we will dive into what's going on with the Miami Marlins. We saw them over the weekend here, and What is this club going to be doing? We're going to find out and dive into all of this and see where they are in the state of their perpetual rebuild as Craig Mish, longtime Marlins reporter, joins me next on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley, right here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
I love baseball. Now back to more Grant McAuley and From the Diamond. Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer from Mark Spain Real Estate. 855-299-SOLD. On Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back to From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game as we continue our trip around the big leagues. And we're not going to go too far because the Braves and the Marlins, of course, have hooked up this weekend at Truist Park. And to help me break down the series and get us up to speed a little bit on what's going on with the 2025 Marlins, I want to welcome in Craig Mish, who you can catch on Sports Grid daily from 11 a.m. to noon. You can also see him on select home games as part of the Marlins pre- and post-broadcast on the FanDuel Sports Network. Craig, thanks so much for making some time for me. Braves and Marlins meeting for the first of many times this year, and these are two clubs that come into this weekend with, well, obviously, very different positions in the offseason power rankings, but very different places in the standings than we're used to as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a great start for Miami, albeit, of course, the game Friday night against the Braves did not go their way at all, but Miami, certainly Grant, being in the position that they're in and already having the wins that they have, I think probably would catch some people by surprise. They got off to a really good start against the Pirates and did fight hard against the Mets too, although they lost 2 out of 3. And, certainly now we'll see if things turn for them. There's no telling, certainly. It's a long season, but I would say that the organization and the fans right now would have to be content with the record that the Marlins have thus far.
Yeah, it is certainly a long season, and I think everybody who watched the Atlanta Braves out on the West Coast is very thankful for that fact. But while it might be a little bit of a role reversal in the early season returns for these two clubs through a couple of series, the Marlins have definitely flashed some fight in the early going as well, and that's something that over the course of a long season you're certainly going to need as you grind out the 162. And when we talk about the Marlins, Craig, and you know much better than I, that so much of the focus seems to be on the comings and goings, the transactions, the inevitable trades, the reshaping of the roster. Peter Bendix is the latest to have that responsibility to, I guess, put his stamp on this franchise. What has been your impression of the job he's doing, I guess, and how he's doing it, and ultimately what to expect from this front office and how they go about all of this in the coming years?
Yeah, there's massive changes in the front office with analytics and player development. And as you know, those things can take years to figure out as to whether or not they're successful or not. So I think while he has things going in the right direction, inevitably people are going to want to see results on the field eventually. And whether or not that comes this year or next year or a few years down the line, I think that will probably be the better answer. But to date, there's been some really solid transactions. You go back to last year, they picked up their starting second baseman, Reynaldo Lopez, off waivers. He's been one of their top performers this season. They made a trade last year where they acquired 2 players from Baltimore in Connor Norby and Kyle Stowers. Stowers is off to a good start. Norby's been hurt. And they traded Trevor Rogers, who hasn't thrown a pitch yet for the Orioles this season. So overall, I would think some pretty positive moves have been made. But, this is all going to come down to wins and losses eventually. And we're just kind of going to have to see the way things play out. But transaction-wise, I think for the most part, it's been positive. A lot of players still in the minor leagues right now that I think we'll get a glimpse in the second half of the season.
We're a long way away from the trade deadline, which, of course, is, the end of July now. And then last year, I kind of want to flash back to that particular deadline. You mentioned there was some wheeling and dealing, some deals that were done. And one of the players who was sent out of town was Jazz Chisholm. And while Jazz is not going to be a part, obviously, of the Marlins moving forward, he did have some interesting comments not long ago about maybe fitting in to the Marlins clubhouse. There can be a variety of reasons that players maybe vibe or don't vibe, whatever might have gone on or didn't go on, or just different people's perceptions of all of that. But when you look at Jazz's time with the Marlins, does it feel a bit like a missed opportunity for him and for the club?
I think that's fair to say. The one thing I don't disagree with, I think it could have worked here. I don't know why it wouldn't have. It just was a matter of Miami wanting to go in a different direction for the future, where he was part of a massive trade exodus. Basically, everybody traded with the exception of a couple of players that had major league time and experience. Then later on, of course, Jake Berger traded in the offseason. Jesus Luzardo traded in the offseason. So he was part of what was maybe expected a couple of years ago to be a core of the future. But looking at where the Marlins were at, to see, his arbitration number rising, and he'd become a free agent in a couple of years, they chose to part ways. And, as far as everything that happened there, I think everybody was sort of culpable in that. And, Jazz, probably looking back on it, would probably want to change some of the things that he did. I would guess, I don't want to speak for him, but knowing the way that I did, he was a player that was growing up in the organization, didn't feel comfortable. Sometimes things are handled great, sometimes not so great. In Jazz's case, I think he is a phenomenal player. I think he's going to have a very bright future in New York. And, honestly, the situation in New York is probably better for him in the sense that he does have these superstar veterans like Aaron Judge to look across the room and say, hey, look, I got to, hold myself accountable, because this guy is, arguably the best player in baseball, or one of them. So I wish Jazz nothing but the best. I hope he succeeds. We had a great relationship when he was here, and, I certainly am following along his career now in New York.
And very interesting to go from those situations. We can see the difference in obviously where he was and where he's ended up, but maybe the expectations as well of kind of being the franchise standard bearer in Miami and not really having to think about that or worry about that at all could simplify an awful lot of things for him up in New York, where he does have a host of other star players around him. One question that the Miami Marlins are already dealing with this season revolves around the Sandy Alcantara trade speculation. The former Cy Young winner is back from Tommy John. It's no secret that plenty of clubs would love to have a chance to add a pitcher like that, and why wouldn't they? He's under a very team-friendly contract for what he brings to the table. The trade deadline, though, is months away, as we just talked about, but you've been around Sandy for a while. You've seen him come back into the fray this year. Could you walk us through where he is now and maybe how the club is attempting to manage the situation for him and the expectations when it comes to, whether or not he's still in a Marlins uniform this time next week or this time next year?
Yeah, it's still hard to say for the future, because that team-friendly contract is also team-friendly to Miami too, but right. I understand that there's going to be speculation, and there should be. He's a player that is one of the best at his position in the game. He's a Cy Young Award winner. And Miami, at least on paper, is not expected to compete this year. And next year, who knows? Even with an improvement, it still may not be a postseason team. And then all of a sudden, you're talking about him, hitting free agency again. So I don't expect those conversations to go away. I do expect Miami to listen, just like they did listen on a lot of other players this offseason. But I think from the Marlins' perspective, when you look at their farm system, yes, they have some nice young potential players coming through, both on the pitching and hitting end. But, what I don't see, Grant, is I don't see a superstar player in the organization other than him. So I think for them to trade him, they don't need to make a trade on 3 guesses. If they're going to do a trade, they need to get it 100% right, a top prospect in baseball. And I guess the only issue when you think about the other side is those teams that have those prospects never want to trade those guys. They always hang on to them because it's cost controlled, 6 or 7 years. And so while Sandy is team friendly, you could say that the young prospects are friendlier. So it remains to be seen if he will get dealt. My lean is that at the very least, he's with the team through the trade deadline. And it just wouldn't surprise me to see him pitch the whole season with the team. I think for now, and we'll see how things progress. But again, a very friendly contract to the Marlins now. If they plan on competing in a couple of years, he still would be part of it.
Yeah, interesting to look at it that way as well, because that team-friendly deal is exactly that, and it's probably one reason the Miami Marlins were very happy to sign him to that. Chatting with Craig Mish here on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. He joins me on the WadeFord.com hotline. And just one more thought on that. I don't think any player wants to hear their name thrown around in the rumor mill on a nonstop basis, certainly. But it's hard to put it aside given what the Marlins have been known to do, dealing away their top big league players on a pretty regular basis. But I also doubt you can dismiss the notion of an early season deal, because the Marlins traded Luis Arraez in early May a year ago. So Sandy Alcantara to me is an even bigger prize. So maybe it's apples to oranges in that case, but I could understand if I'm Sandy that I might want to have a little bit of control of the narrative, at least on the way to the trade deadline or beyond.
Yeah, I've talked to him a lot, and I talked to him in spring training, both on camera and off, and I just don't think that this bothers him at all. He knows what the situation is. He knows where the team is. And I think that he wants to stay here, but I think he also understands that it's a business. Some team that could potentially win the World Series comes calling in July and he's traded. I think he would accept it and move on. That's just kind of the demeanor that he has. I personally don't think it will affect him. I think the only thing that could potentially affect him is the fact that the guy hasn't pitched in a year. So we kind of have to watch and see him pitch over the course of this year. and see how things flow. But he's always a very confident guy, wants to take the mound every fifth day. Great on the field, great off the field. He'd be a great catch for anyone. I would be foolish to sit here and say there's no chance that he's going to get traded. I've seen this show before, of course, both in baseball and with the Marlins too. But yes, he likes to be in the know and know what's going on and know when he's pitching and how long he's going to be able to stay in the game. And if there are teams interested in him, the organization has communicated all that stuff with him too. So we'll just have to check back. I personally think sometime in July. You know what, Grant, I just don't see this being a Luis Arias type deal. I don't see that. I see this coming later on if they do it.
Yeah, if is the big question, most certainly. Now, Miami, as you mentioned, picked up a lot of talented players, an influx of those brought on by a series of trades last year, and that helped the team jump from near the bottom of the MLB prospect ranking to the middle of the pack rather quickly, and that might not sound like a major thing if you're sizing up minor league systems, but to do it that quickly is definitely a big deal. So let me ask you, who should we have our eye on as young players that could help the Marlins maybe this season and in the not-too-distant future?
Yeah, they not only have some players that they got in the trades, but they actually drafted a couple of pitchers, Noble Meyer and Thomas White, one right-handed pitcher, one left-handed pitcher, that really have looked good and are on the fast track to the big leagues. So I think you combine that with one of the players that they received in the Jazz Chisholm trade named Agustin Ramirez. He's projected to catch for them at some point this season, if not next, and has a very big bat, is off to a good start in the minor leagues. So for me, I think that player is probably the one to watch as far as putting it all together in the majors and the minors, because I do think that he has power and, hopefully can play the position of catcher. And then the other player they got in the Jesus Luzardo deal from Philadelphia is Starlin Caba. Offensively, we're going to have to watch his progression before he even touches the big leagues, and still I think that's a couple of years away. But those two players I think project as starters. And like I said, having two starting pitchers like that and having Ramirez at catcher and this kid Caba eventually with maybe Otto Lopez at second, you're starting to build something. But what the Marlins are indeed missing is that, Roman Anthony, Sebastian Walcott type prospect. That is, I think, what they're really short on there. And whether or not that comes in a Sandy deal or comes in a draft or comes in some other way, that to me will bring the fans back. That's what they need, and they have not really had that in a long period of time.
Yeah, and certainly that feels reminiscent of the Braves rebuild, which wasn't altogether that long ago. And yeah, there were a lot of great young players. They did some trades, they did some drafting, but you had to have, I think, kind of that one figurehead that really got you behind that wave of the future. For the Braves, it was Ronald Acuña Jr. For the Marlins,
right.
We'll see who that might be. And Miami had a relatively quiet winter, which we know all about in Atlanta as well. It was pretty quiet up here, but maybe for different reasons. How would you categorize the work and the effort to maybe supplement a young roster, an up-and-coming roster with some veteran players that can help Miami get to the point where that young core could be ready to take that next step? I just feel like some people like to dismiss it a little bit out of hand, the veteran presence, if you will, but I think it's a really important part of the dynamic of building a club that does things consistently on a daily basis the right way and sets itself up for success because they simply know how to go about their business, as the old baseball cliche goes.
Yeah, I think that, look, most prognostications have Miami in the 60-something win range over the course of the season. They see that. Maybe they think they're a little bit better than that. Obviously, nothing publicly would ever be said, hey, we think we're way better than every projection. But, realistically speaking, I think the question that the Marlins had to ask themselves is, do we treat this offseason as we've treated past ones? I think people forget that several years ago, they signed Gene Segura to a 3-year or 2-year contract. They signed Avisail Garcia to a $50 million contract, Soler to a $40 million contract, Cueto 1 year, $10-12 million. And by going out and doing that again, yes, they absolutely could have. But I sort of suspect, Grant, internally, the way that they looked at it was like, what is that going to do for us right now? Is that going to make us an 80-win team, a 70-win team, a 75-win team? It just seems to me that the Marlins thought that this was not the year to go chase free agents. But beyond that, I think free agency will occur again in Miami. But looking at where their projections were internally, externally, they understood the deal. And the deal was, this is probably not the year to go chase down any kind of big free agents of any kind. And that's just the tack that they took.
Yeah, and obviously a lot of things go into the decision points when it comes to winning and setting itself up to do so. Craig, you do great work following the Marlins. Let everybody know where they can connect with you and where they can follow along.
Sure. On Sports Grid, on the Sports Grid Network every day, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. It's a streaming show called Newswire. And for those people who have access to the streaming for Major League Baseball, MLB TV, or the FanDuel app that broadcasts the games, I'm on the Marlins live pregame shows on select home games this season. So, hopefully we can talk again when these two teams face off like they will many times. And certainly I'll be watching this weekend to see how it all shakes out.
Well, Craig, as always, I appreciate your time. I very much look forward to more conversations about these two clubs here in the 2025 baseball season. Take care.
Thanks for having me.
Great to catch up with Craig Mish. When we come back, we will turn our attention back to the Atlanta Braves and talk about closing out the weekend and, of course, the week to come with the Philadelphia Phillies on deck. We'll hit that next on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. Welcome back into From the Diamond right here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. I am Grant McAuley from the Kia Studios in Midtown, where I just heard from Craig Mish a lot about the Miami Marlins. Always enjoy catching up with Craig. I've been able to do his program some. He's just as dialed in as you can get on a club that, you talk about the frustrations that the Braves have to deal with, and I would describe them as first world problems. Some things have gone wrong. Some guys have gotten hurt. There have been some October exits, especially the last 3 years, that have been particularly frustrating when you think about the talent level and coming off a World Series win in 2021. But then you look at what the Marlins have gone through, where it seems like every, couple of years, they've got a new 5-year plan. And I'm here to tell you, if your 5-year plan gets blown up every third year and you have to start over, you do not have a plan. So they're going to have to figure some things out down there. And we'll see what Peter Bendix is able to do. As I talked about with Craig, that club jumping from near the bottom in prospect rankings, which is not where you want to be as a rebuilding club, right into the middle of the pack in 1 year, thanks in large part to their trade deadline and their draft a year ago, that's a big step up. But they are missing that one signature headliner, top 5 in all of baseball type prospect, at least for now. But maybe that guy is in the offing. Maybe they get that guy in a trade for Sandy Alcantara. We'll see. But the Braves have got to deal with him. He's not going to get traded before first pitch, it doesn't sound like. So Sandy Alcantara against the Braves and Grant Holmes on the mound on Sunday again, if the weather will, of course, cooperate for these two clubs. After that, though, the Braves are off on Monday. I think they'll breathe a big sigh of relief, get a little chance to reset again. I know they just had an off day, but after what they went through to start the year, coming off trip to Arizona, coming off spring training, just getting settled in here for a moment. But don't get too comfortable because the Philadelphia Phillies are rolling into town. And that Phillies club, obviously, that's a good one. That's a tough one. That's a nemesis for the Braves and has been for the past few years. First showdown of 2025, and the Braves, quite frankly, have got to show up at the plate. We can look at the pitching, and I can tell you the probables. Looks like Chris Sale, then Bryce Elder in Game 2, Spencer Schwellenbach in Game 3. I think 2 out of those 3 starters you feel pretty confident against. Bryce Elder has been a bit of a wild card at best, and obviously hasn't been at his best against the Philadelphia Phillies the last couple of years, but scoring runs would certainly help out, whatever the case is. The Braves are already 5.5 games back of the Phillies, and again, I talked about this earlier. You asked me when it matters or when you start doing that first real check of where you are in the season. I'd tell you about a third of the way through, so about Memorial Day, 54 games in. Well, if you're looking at 5.5 games back after playing less than 10 games, you're not in the ideal spot. So I think, to say the least, a series win against the Phillies will go a long way towards making it feel like the Braves are getting back on track. But have they shown you anything that leads you to believe that is up their sleeve? Maybe not. But historically speaking, this has been a better club than they have shown over the last week and a half, and I feel like a broken record. So if I am one, I apologize, but that's just the way I see it from 21 years of covering baseball and even longer watching it. I've seen worse Braves teams. I've seen more uninspired Braves teams. This one has been truly baffling in a lot of ways. The lack of consistent offense, though, is what this club has to figure out. The longer that goes on, quite obviously, the longer this sluggish start is going to continue. They've got the guys to do it. We talked about it earlier in the show. The Matt Olsons, the Austin Rileys, the Marcell Ozunas, the Ozzie Albies, the Michael Harrises, and then around a month from now, you're hoping to be talking about Ronald Acuña Jr. being back in this mix. And that, I know, is something everybody's looking forward to, but a lot of things need to go right before that happens so that it is truly that upgrade, that level up that the Braves are hoping that it will be, because nobody, even Ronald Acuña Jr., and given that he's coming off of an injury, I think you need to temper your expectations even more. Nobody's walking through that door to save the team all by themselves. It's going to take 26 guys all pulling that rope in the same direction to get this thing turned around. Now, one guy who has done more than his fair share of pulling on that rope for the Braves to help them out is Spencer Schwellenbach. 14 innings this year, 3 hits, 1 walk, 14 strikeouts, has not allowed a run, was masterful against the Miami Marlins on Friday, one of the more dominant performances of his young career, a career-high 8 innings, shutout ball. He was 8-7 with a 3.35 ERA as a rookie last year. 123 and 2/3 innings, only 23 walks, 127 strikeouts. And coming into the season, you just thought, wow, I mean, it's tantalizing, the possibilities for this guy and what he's shown. I mean, what can he do this year? Well, he's just showing you there is another level that he could reach as well. And I'll go ahead and say, it's a way too early Cy Young prediction here. I think he's going to be in the mix for this all year long. And you've got the reigning Cy Young Award winner on the staff, by the way. Won a Triple Crown last year. His name's Chris Sale. He's not bad either. You got Spencer Strider, who I'll talk about more in just a moment, who is rejoining the staff in the not-too-distant future from the sound of everything on his rehab assignment. But it's quite conceivable that Spencer Schwellenbach may be the feature arm on this staff and could be for a long time to come. And that's not hyperbole either. And here's the reason why. It's not just, hey, look at the numbers, he's great. When I watch him pitch, he looks great. I can see why he's good. This kid throws 6 different pitches. And keep in mind, he was a shortstop primarily in college. He did some closing where you don't need 6 pitches to be a reliever. Then he got Tommy John as soon as he was drafted. So you would not have thought, okay, well, it's just straight upward from here because this is one of the premier pitching prospects in all of baseball. But the Braves, they identified something. They didn't find Paul Skeens. Anybody could see Paul Skeens and know, hey, this is a special arm right here. This guy has superstar written all over him. Instead, they found what I would call a diamond in the rough. And they have developed him, and give credit to Spencer Schwellenbach as well. This is somebody who clearly has put into his craft, who works at it, who refines it, and who has come up with a 6-pitch arsenal that has a fastball that was pumping 98 the other night, a split finger, a slider, a curveball, and a sinker. Dude doesn't even throw a changeup. His off-speed pitches are just breaking balls or varieties of fastballs. Everything that he throws, though, he throws with precision. He throws with a purpose. It doesn't matter where he is in the count. It seems like he's got conviction in all 6 of those pitches, and I will tell you right now, that is uncommon. A 6-pitch mix is uncommon. Let's start with that. Let alone throwing all 6 of those pitches at least 10% of the time. It's not just occasionally, a couple times a night, I might throw this one curveball. No, he'll throw it pretty much in whatever the count is to whatever the hitter is that he feels like it best serves him. And that kind of confidence in that arsenal is why Spencer Schwellenbach is sitting on 14 scoreless innings to start the year and is, I think, one of the emerging star pitchers in all of baseball, and that is not a hard sell. So, on the other side of this coin, another young Braves pitcher who I think has a lot of upside but hasn't really been able to put all that together because, hey, let's face it, again, it's uncommon to have 6 pitches and precision and control and all of those things. If it were that easy, everybody would do it. But A.J. Smith-Shawver has gotten a couple of starts. We saw him again on Saturday night at Truist Park. Struggled, and in particular, the one real Achilles heel for him is the 2-out trouble that he's gotten into. He's got a split finger, doesn't throw it as hard as Spencer Schwellenbach does, but it's a capable pitch, a good strikeout pitch. He throws it 35% of the time, more so than his fastball, which sits in the mid-90s. But I think the one thing I've noticed with A.J. Smith-Shawver, and I don't know exactly what to chalk it up to, but he'll be in the same start, in the same inning, throwing 97 miles an hour with the four-seam fastball to one guy, and then grooving one 92, 93 miles an hour right down the middle to the next guy. And major league hitters, they can hit that one. And Matt Mervis yesterday jumped all over a first pitch, drove it over the wall, and you just kind of got the feeling like, all right, there's still some polishing that has to happen here, but it shouldn't be surprising because A.J. Smith-Shawver is a very young pitcher who got to the big leagues very much ahead of schedule and is still putting some things together. But 2-out trouble has been his real problem this year. Opponents are batting .467 against Shawver with 2 outs in an inning. He's also walked 6 batters, so the OPS is nearly 1,500, and that's in 2025 in a couple of starts. A small sample size, but some serious trouble with 2 outs in an inning. That's something he's going to have to button up if he wants to find the success that I think is in there. He's going to have to get that all figured out. But the Braves are going to have to figure out things on the offense. It's nice to talk about, Spencer Schwellenbach. It's good to talk about the development that you'd like to see from A.J. Smith-Shawver, but I can't really nitpick the pitching too much. The loss of Reynaldo Lopez is what it is. There's just no way around it. You don't have somebody who was designed to step into that void. It needed to be Reynaldo, and it's not going to be. However, scoring some runs would take some, I think, focus off of the pitching staff, some pressure off of the pitching staff, which, let's face it, probably has to feel a little bit like, runs are hard to come by, and I'm not going to say it puts more pressure on them, but it certainly feels that way, and I know for fans, that's what the experience is because, the other team scores a couple of runs real quick, and you start wondering, all right, well, which version of the Braves offense are we going to get? The version we saw on Friday night, which has only happened once this year, the version that we saw jump out to a 5-0 lead in the finale against the Los Angeles Dodgers, and then unable to tack on some runs when they needed to, and unfortunately got walked off by Shohei Ohtani. Which version of the Braves offense are you going to see? They need to find a version that is more consistent, that has the ability to manufacture some runs. And I dropped that stat on you earlier about the 2025 Reds thus far, the first team since 1960 to lose 3 consecutive games by a 1-0 score, so shut out 3 times. They had a 35-inning scoreless drought going on. That's nearly 4 straight games. That's not great. But the Reds and the Braves are the only 2 teams in all of baseball thus far this year to have been shut out 3 times. That's 3 times in 9 games. And I found that little nugget digging through the Braves game notes, as I always do. As a former play-by-play broadcaster, I think I'll always look at game notes and think, all right, where can I use this? Well, I got to the end of the game notes, and I know that this is probably just somebody having some fun in a season that hasn't been altogether that fun, but I love this stat, and I feel like you can file it under the, did you make it this far? Because if you did, this is your reward for it. But the stat that they put in there, the Braves, winless in games that they failed to score this year. A 0% winning percentage. They're tied with 29 other clubs for worst in Major League Baseball when they do not score. I appreciate it. I appreciate the effort. We all need a laugh every once in a while, but there's been nothing funny, obviously, about the Braves offense. And one of the guys in the midst of this struggle early in the year is Austin Riley. Here's something else that the Braves media staff was nice enough to point out, because you watch Austin Riley, obviously there's been a pretty slow start to the year. He homered on opening day. Not much has happened since then for him. But if you go inside those numbers and kind of look at what are the trends that tell me, is this some bad luck? Can we expect some better results? And I don't have enough time in the show to get into expected stats and what that means from the StatCast side of things. And I don't know that anybody really wants to hear it right now. They have their own expectations. They just want to see results. As Freddie Gonzalez once said, and here's a deep cut for you, nobody wants to hear the labor pains. They just want to see the baby. And I think that's kind of where we are with nobody wants to hear about it anymore. They just want to see the results start to happen that you expect to happen. And the Braves are obviously in that boat as well. They like to see it. But Riley, 94th percentile, and this is out of 100, and the higher you are, the better, in barrel percentage and bat speed. So the swing is there. 100th percentile in launch angle sweet spot. And what that would tell you is if he's in that percentile and he's able to put that barrel on the ball, it should go a long way. It should leave the park a lot. It should do some damage. And I think that's in there for Austin Riley. But obviously the results, that's what we're measuring it by. And right now, the measurements for Riley, among other Braves hitters, and the offense in general, has just not been where it needs to be. Let's talk about Spencer Strider for a moment before we get out of here. He was in action on Friday night as Spencer Schwellenbach was looking great against the Miami Marlins. It was Strider firing 5 1/3 hitless innings, 2 walks, and 8 strikeouts for AAA Gwinnett. Fastball was approaching 98 miles an hour, sitting 95, 96. Saw Strider yesterday. He was at the with the big club at Truist Park, doing a little light work, a little light throwing in the outfield. He'll be making one more minor league rehab start, at least his next one anyway. We'll call it that. It comes Thursday in Norfolk for the Gwinnett Stripers, and then we'll see where he is after that. 90 pitches is the goal for Spencer Strider in that one, and if he's up to 90 pitches, I think you could very much project that if he's feeling good after that one, the Braves would feel like he's built up enough to help them at the big league level, and this is a rotation without Reynaldo Lopez that could certainly use the help. So we'll see how that all plays out. The Braves will wrap up their series against the Marlins on Sunday. Then it's the Phillies for 3 starting on Tuesday, and then they hit the road to play the Tampa Bay Rays to close out the week. That is what's ahead for the Atlanta Braves. I want to thank Scott Coleman of Hammer Territory for joining me, and Craig Mish, who's covered the Marlins for a long time, good friend of the program, for also checking in as well. And thank you for listening to From the Diamond. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Find it on the Odyssey app, and check me out each and every Sunday. We'll be back in the 5 o'clock time slot coming your way next Sunday right here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. Again, thanks for joining me. I'm Grant McAuley, Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. This has been From the Diamond. So long, everyone.